All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program. You know, we're talking Johnny Cuba, European roots with that Caribbean soul. Pick up a refreshing German lager in a can. Go to johnnycuba.us. Find the nearest location to you using the Johnny locator. It's so easy. Remember, always drink responsibly. And of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. So joining us a day earlier than normal, our pal is Jamey Eisenberg, CBS Sports Fantasy Football expert. Week 4 gets underway tomorrow. Jamey normally joins us on Thursdays. My travel schedule this week has changed because you got the storm. So appreciate you hanging out with us today, Jamey. Who's so far through 3 weeks? Give me a couple of the fantasy players that fantasy owners are most disappointed with right now.
Well, I mean, you can make a case for basically the first 3 overall picks. I mean, McCaffrey easily, with the injury, and now he's seeing a specialist in Germany. Tyreek Hill with the Tua Tagovailoa injury. It's tough to trust really any of the Dolphins until Tua's back, but certainly the pass catchers. And then CeeDee Lamb, who's gotten off to a slow start, apologizing for his performance against the Ravens. So all 3 of those guys, we just spent some time on our Fantasy Football Today podcast talking about some buy low candidates, and could you make some offers for some of these guys? McCaffrey's in sort of a different category because you don't know when he's going to return. But Tyreek, are you trying to get in before Tua comes back and maybe deal with some of the sluggish performances that may happen, as we saw in Week 3 against Seattle? Are you trying to get CeeDee Lamb now before he blows up, because that's probably going to happen Thursday night? So really the top 3 guys have just been hugely disappointing. All the tight ends, essentially the elite tight ends, have not been elite. Just lack of touchdowns, injuries now to McBride and Laporta. Kelsey, huge disappointment. Mahomes himself has been a disappointment, so it's been a very, very strange year, very strange season so far when we're talking about Sam Darnold being a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes.
Who are a couple of the guys that it looks like right now, if you snagged them, we're talking those late round guys who are looking like big time players? Who are those guys who, if you drafted them, you got a major chance of winning your league?
Jameson Williams looks really good. He's had 2 strong games out of 3, and Detroit is going to lean on him. So he's been off to a great start. Zach Moss is, 2 of 3 games. Devin Singletary, 2 of 3 games. Both guys performing at a very high level right now. Obviously, Jordan Mason, he's probably the poster child for this topic, just with how he's stepped in for Christian McCaffrey and looking like a must-start running back right now. The quarterbacks really have been, sort of all over the place at this point. When Daniel Jones has more 20-point games than Mahomes, again, Sam Darnold, these are guys off the waiver wire mostly, but it's not really sustainable. I think the one of the big stories that we're looking at right now, and we talked about this on our show today, is Deontay Johnson, for example. He was awful with Bryce Young, and then Andy Dalton comes in and he looks like what he was in his peak Steelers days, and that looks like something that could be sustainable just because of Dalton. It's almost reminiscent of last year with Anthony Richardson and not getting the best out of Michael Pittman, which we're seeing again right now. And then Gardner Minshew comes in, and Michael Pittman takes off. Sometimes just these veteran quarterbacks, they know how to get guys open. They know how to get these top tier receivers that get open the football in a different way. And so Deontay Johnson for a mid to late round pick can end up being a league winner right now.
Who are some guys who are performing right now that you don't believe will keep it up? Sell high candidates.
So for me, I always look at sort of the older running backs or the guys that have been have an injury history. J.K. Dobbins has been great, but the story there, he missed 43 games in his career prior to this season. Aaron Jones is off to a fantastic start, struggled with injuries last year. He's 29 years old. Derrick Henry, at some point, Father Time will catch up to him. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I think he's still a high candidate because he's touchdown dependent. Terry McLaurin just had a huge game, 4 catches, 100 yards. Jane Daniels is definitely has the ability to throw the ball down the field, but he just didn't show it in the first 2 games until he faced, one of the worst defenses in football in the Bengals. So he might be somebody you want to flip. Obviously, if you can trade Jawan Jennings right now, based on what he just did, 46 PPR points, looked like Jerry Rice out there. Terrell Owens, you name your favorite 49ers receiver, he looked like him. Somebody that's 0-3 or 1-2 looking for some receiver help would certainly want to acquire somebody like that. So anytime you get these players that are, coming from a spot, some of the guys that we talked about as well, Jameson Williams, fits this category too as a sell high candidate. You should try to flip them for something that could help you down the road.
What if you have someone like if you have Sam Darnold or maybe even Jadon Daniels? These guys were definitely drafted as backup quarterbacks. So whoever your starter is a starting caliber guy. But let's say it's someone like Burrow or it's Mahomes. Do you move off of those guys, try and get some value? Are you confident enough in a guy like Sam Darnold, in a guy like Jadon Daniels as your starter moving forward?
Yeah, I don't know if I put those two together, but I get your point. Daniels to me was a starter, like he was a top 12
Okay.
quarterback on my ranking. So I anticipated him based on his running to be a starting caliber quarterback. But the idea was to pair him with somebody else. In terms of Darnold, like I don't think you want to buy into that just yet. Now we've seen these reclamation projects work out well. I mean, Geno Smith has turned his career around in Seattle. Baker Mayfield's turned his career around in Tampa Bay. So hopefully the same thing happens for Darnold, who we know was a top 5 overall pick in the NFL draft and has, flopped with the Jets and other stops. But now he's getting good coaching and has one of the best receivers in football. So it could be sustainable. Is he going to, be a consistent 23 plus point per game type of guy? That I'd probably bet against. He already got banged up once last week in the game against Houston. If he suffers an injury, they have a guy behind him that they can turn to. So Daniels, yes, I would consider, trusting him rest of way. I would start him over Mahomes this week if you had to make that call. And I think in case of Darnold and Daniels, I would start both of them over Anthony Richardson, who was drafted to be a starting fantasy quarterback. So there are instances where you could be benching the guy that you drafted as a starter. And for Mahomes, to go back to your original question, guys who have disappointed, it's now, what are we, 3 games in the season? So it's 20 games in the regular season where he's been basically a mediocre fantasy quarterback. And that's frustrating to watch because there's so much more there. He just hasn't had to do it because the defense has been good. The run game, for the most part, prior to Pacheco going down, has been solid. And he's just not getting that elite level production. Hopefully that changes.
Let's talk about tomorrow night. Again, Jamey Eisenberg is joining us a day earlier than he normally does, helping me adapt to my travel schedule for this week. So tomorrow night, Giants, Cowboys. That's getting week 4 going. What do we like?
I think Dak picks up where he left off in the Ravens game. He started to click a little bit, and after 2 bad games, hopefully that's a sign of things to come. He typically beats up on the Giants. He has a great record against them, as I'm sure most people would expect. Giants defense has been better than expected, but still gives up production to opposing quarterbacks. So I think Dak's got top 5 upside, certainly should be a starter for this week. CeeDee Lamb, it feels like there's a squeaky wheel game coming. This is a bad secondary. Amari Cooper just destroyed them, for example. So I think we could see a situation where we get that elite level production from CeeDee Lamb. And then Jake Ferguson is really one of the only tight ends with a pulse right now. So the fact that he's coming off a 95-yard game, you're starting him without hesitation. For the Giants, Daniel Jones, he's doing what is asked of him. They should have beat the Commanders 2 weeks ago. He's leaning on Malik Neighbors, which is what you should do. He's a star in the making, and Neighbors is a must-start receiver. And then Devin Singletary, the last 2 weeks has been, very good. The FAU product coming through with 2 strong games. The Dallas Cowboys right now are number 1 in most fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs. Now, most of that is Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry. So Singletary not in that weight class. But Jerome Ford did have over 18 PPR points against the Cowboys in week 1. So Singletary's worth starting this week also.
Let's look at the Panthers for a moment here. The Panthers are hosting the Bengals with Andy Dalton starting again. Guys like you mentioned, Deontay Johnson. I know Adam Thielen is on IR right now. Chuba Hubbard. All of a sudden, are Panthers skill position players viable options?
Without a doubt. I do a start of the week every week, which is to kind of highlight a player that's not a considered a must-start guy. Chuba Hubbard's my start of the week for this week. Deontay Johnson's a top 15 caliber receiver. And Andy Dalton, I would start him over Richardson, for example. If we're looking at quarterbacks, I start him over Aaron Rodgers. So 1 game in, 30 PPR points, 30 fantasy points, excuse me, it's hard to overlook. And so this Bengals defense is awful. That's a big part of it. It's not just the Panthers looking good. It's the Bengals being atrocious on defense. Now, there is clearly a sense of desperation. They're an 0-3 team. We know a lot of people thought they were a Super Bowl contender, but they're just not playing very well right now. So this is a perfect opportunity for Dalton and the Panthers to build off what we saw last week. And I think this will be a high-scoring game because I don't think either defense is very good. So Vegas has it pegged. I think the point total is expected to be 48. So wouldn't be surprising if we get in the 50s with this game.
The 49ers are hosting the Patriots in the late window on Sunday. Do we have any semblance yet? Again, we're talking on Wednesday, so we'll get injury reports coming out later today. Do we have any idea what the 49ers are going to look like this weekend?
I mean, just given the nature of their injuries, soft tissue injuries for guys like Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, Samuel's got a track record of missing time when these things happen. So I'm sure they're going to be cautious, especially their star running back had a calf injury. Now he's in Germany getting his Achilles checked out. So the last thing they want to do is rush these guys back in a game that they should be able to win without Deebo Samuel or George Kittle. Obviously, you never want to expect that. Look what happened to them last week. They were up 14-0, and they blew that lead and lose to the Rams. But I can't imagine they're going to rush these guys back if they're not 100%. So at this point, I would plan to be without them. Jennings was amazing, as we talked about, 46 PPR points last week, caught 11 of 12 targets, 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk at some point is going to have a big game. It could easily happen this week. And then Jordan Mason should dominate this game because it was we saw last week, the Patriots couldn't stop the run. For the Patriots, really, it's just no one you could trust 100%. Ramondre Stevenson is the best bet of the Patriots offensive players.
The Chiefs are at the Chargers in the late slate of games on Sunday. Are you willing to bench Travis Kelce right now?
If there were better tight ends out there, yes. This is crazy. I think there's only 13 tight ends that have scored touchdowns this season. Could have been, and nobody has multiple touchdowns at that position. So it's not like he's the only one who's struggling. I think for this game, it feels as if the Chargers are going to be without Justin Herbert, they may be without, 2 of their offensive linemen. Derwin James is now suspended. This could be a preseason game for the Chiefs. Again, you never want to overlook an opponent, but, they're missing just so much talent. Joey Bosa also may not play. They're just missing so much potential talent if all these guys are out. And so hopefully we'll see Travis Kelce celebrating in the end zone. Hopefully we'll see him, do something of significance. The thought was Pacheco goes down. It now falls on Mahomes to have to do some, Superman type things, which we know he's capable of. But they just gave 17 carries to Carson Steele last week and just kind of operated business as usual. So I'm still starting Kelce. Unfortunately, I still have to rank him in the top 5 because the position is so bad right now. And when you lose guys like McBride and Laporta, it's tough to find replacements. So I'm not going to get cute with the tight end position. Still going to start Kelce.
All right, Jamey, let's do it. Monday night. I mean, we're still 5 days away, but still. Dolphins, Titans, Monday Night Football. What are we doing about the Dolphins here?
So I still think Achane's a must start. It's not an easy matchup. Titans are really good against the run. I know they did it. They gave up some production to Emmanuel Wilson, the backup running back for the Packers last week, but they did a good job against Josh Jacobs. So they're going to make things tough on Achane. I hope he's involved in the passing game, which was sort of missing last week. You're still starting Tyreek Hill because there's still that potential of what he can be. And Mike McDaniel addressing it after the game. He knows, you got to just create ways for Tyreek to touch the ball. Jet sweeps, wide receiver screens, just, don't throw it down the field. Just give him opportunities to make people miss. So I'm still going to trust him, but he goes from top 3 receiver to, inside the top 20. That's how far he falls without Tua there. And Jalen Waddle is unplayable, so
Wow.
I hope he comes through with a big game and we could all say, okay, I'm upset that I benched him, but I understand why. And look, whether it's Tim Boyle or Skyler or Snoop, whoever starts a quarterback for them this week, I don't think they've named somebody as of yet. They just got to do a better job of maintaining composure in the pocket and leaning on these weapons. Tua is a above average quarterback who looks elite because of the guys around him in the system. These guys just have to look average. And so far, Skylar Thompson has not. And I just need to see something from these guys before you're saying, okay, put these guys back in your lineup. So it's frustrating. It's disappointing. I thought we get a little bit more out of Achane and Jonnu Smith against the Seahawks, but clearly that just didn't happen. So Achane's the one I think that you feel the most comfortable about. Tyreek is still Tyreek. And you just kind of close your eyes when you're setting your lineup and you go, okay, I'll take my chances with Jalen Waddle potentially.
Wow. Jamey, tell everybody how they can listen to you or watch you leading up to the game tomorrow night and, of course, this weekend.
CBS Sports HQ, CBS Sports Network, CBSSports.com. Basically, you just type in CBS and you'll find us somewhere. And our Fantasy Football Today podcast, you can watch us on YouTube and download us wherever podcasts are available.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamey, for adjusting your schedule this week. I appreciate it. We'll talk next week, man.
Yes, sir. Safe travels, bud.
Thank you.